It is time for our travel segment, Wander the World, and we are wandering in our very own backyard today as we shine the spotlight on one of Cape Town's most distinctive landmarks. Morstead's Mill has occupied its spot in the shadow of Devil's Peak since the year 1796. It is the oldest surviving complete windmill in South Africa and the last working windmill in Africa. But as you will know, it has been through a lot in recent years, most notably the fact that just one day after the completion of a 6-year restoration project, it was burnt in the fire that destroyed parts of UCT. Starting all over again, it took another 3 years for it to be rebuilt and restored. And we are going to have a conversation today with the man who was in charge of that restoration. I want to, though, first thank our listener, Don, who wrote to me saying, please get this guest onto the show, because Don and some of his family members had the opportunity to do a tour of Morstead's Mill some time ago and said the distant past and the most recent restoration make for the most fascinating history. From the acquisition of the wood to replace all that was burned, to the technical work that went into constructing the lathe for the gear, the brake and the cap rings, it was astounding. Don, thank you so much for pointing us in the direction of the story of Morstead's Mill, and it's a huge pleasure to welcome on the line Andy Selfe, who is somebody who has studied both windmills and watermills in depth, has been involved in the restoration of a number of different mills in addition to Morstead's Mill, and maybe we'll have time to talk about some of those others. But Andy, firstly, thank you for making yourself available to us on a public holiday. We really appreciate your time and welcome to the show.
Thank you, Pippa. Yes, it's good speaking. You've said everything that needs to be said.
Interview finished. Okay. Sorry about that. Andy, before... One
thing we must get right is that I was only in charge of the moving parts, the working parts.
Okay.
The building, the floors, the beams, the windows, the doors, and the roof were all in the sphere of John Wilson Harris,
yes,
of Fagan's Architects.
Okay. Thanks for clarifying that, Andy, and appreciate that we get to acknowledge his role as well. Thank you for that. Andy, before we talk about the restoration and the history of Morstead's Mill itself, just tell us a little bit about your backstory and where the fascination with water and windmills actually began for you.
Well, I'm a agricultural mechanic by trade, okay. I've got a business in that line, and I'm also a collector of stationary engines, and I was introduced 20 years ago to the watermill at Beaumont Wines, that's Companies Drift, right in the middle of Bot River. Mm-hmm. And that was made 4 times when there was no water to be driven by a stationary engine. So I brought an engine of mine down there, and we got the mill going, part of the mill going in a couple of weeks. But that started a 4-year, every Saturday, every spare minute restoration of that watermill to work with water again.
Okay.
And now we operate that once a month, and it brings a lot of people there, and it's an added attraction to the winery and the deli and everything else that's on the farm.
Okay.
So that started, and during that time, I was asked to help out at Lamotte, and I'm actually today working on an aspect of Lamotte's mill, which has also been, gradually we've been upgrading that one.
Okay.
We're going to be making a new water wheel for that, and I'm working on the mill stands at the moment. So we are going to have that one running absolutely perfectly again, really for the first time since Dr. Rupert brought the equipment from a farm in Ceres many years ago.
Okay.
So that's, and then also in those 4 years, I was asked to help at Morstead's Mill with those upgrades, which spread over 6 years, in fact. We did one aspect, and then we milled for a while, and it was better, and then we said, okay, well, now we've got some money in from the gate, let's tackle the next one. And those restorations, those upgrades really, took 6 years, and as you said, the last of them, the 6th one, we finished the afternoon before the fire.
Unbelievable story. Andy, we'll get back to the fire and to that restoration shortly, but let's go way back in the past. So thank you for the sort of context for the conversation, and fantastic to hear how much work is being done on the water mills as well. This Mostert's mill, though, is unique in being the windmill that is the last working windmill in Africa. What do we know about its early history? We know the date 1796 appears on the structure, but how much do we know about how it came to be there and who actually built the original mill?
It was built by Van Rienen, and it gets the name Mostert from his son-in-law. It was built at the sort of tail end of the VOC's control over food and milling and all the other food supply. The late 1700s, they were fizzling out the VOC, and it's a half-size mill. It's a small farm mill. If you go to Nieuwemolen in Alexandra Hospital, you'll see it's double the size. All the Dutch mills are double the size. So this is a mini farm mill made for the Van Rienens and perhaps their neighbors as well in that time. And it must have been used, say, from the late 1700s for, certainly by the time that Rhodes bought that area as part of Grote Schuur, it was derelict by that stage. We've got photographs of it there. So we don't know how long it was used as the farm mill before it went out of service and perhaps was taken over by the commercial mills, and there were about 15 of them in Cape Town. And then it was derelict by the early 1900s. Then in 1935, it was decided to restore it to working order. Yeah. And a combination of the Dutch government and the South African government, the Department of Public Works that own it, decided to restore it to working order. And they brought a Dutchman over from Holland. He spent about a year here doing a superb job, really. They thought that there was just a few beams to replace, but when he got here, he really discovered that it really needed all, like I had to do all the wooden parts over again. Did a lovely job and got it back into working order. He was held back here. He was going to have an opening, but then the king died and everybody was in mourning, and he had to be kept here until that had passed, and then they had an opening. And then, so that would have been 1936, I suppose, beginning of 36. Yeah. And then it was used again for a tourist attraction. And we are not sure exactly for how long, but we do have a photograph, a cutting of the burger, which shows that it was used for the 1952 Riebeek festival. So that's the last. Yeah. That's the last date that we can pinpoint that it was still in operation. There was a miller there in government uniform, and he's demonstrating in the run up to the Van Riebeek festival. Okay. Then it went out of use again, and it was only in about 94 that the Vernacular Architecture Society spawned I think that's the right word, a group called Friends of Mostert's Mill, and the decision was to find some money and restore it again. And remember, this was 1 year into the new South Africa. Yeah. And where was the money going to come from for something that's clearly colonial? Luckily, there was a fund tucked away that was able to be used, and again, Dutch millwrights were engaged, but they prefabricated a lot of the stuff in Holland and brought it over, and it was assembled. Their parts were assembled in 2 weeks. And Gabi Fagan was still busy on the tower. They couldn't test it. Then they went off on holiday after 2 weeks, toured the country, and climbed on the plane and went home. So after the 94 restoration, it never really worked properly. There was a lot of hiccups, and we rather wonder whether they actually expected us to be seriously milling. But Friends of Mostert Mill are serious, and there's no point in restoring something mechanical like that if it's not going to be used regularly. And the Dutch Volunteer Society, their handbook starts with a statement saying, if a mill is restored and it's not used on a regular basis, within, I think, 10 years, 15 years, it's going to need restoration again. So we mill, Friends of Mostert Mill milled regularly after 94, 95, but we're aware that there were shortcomings with the restoration of 94. And so that was when I was asked to come in and do to help with these upgrades. And there were about 6 of them, I think, altogether.
Just want to say, for anybody coming into this interview halfway, you're listening to Andy Selfe, integrally involved in the restoration of Mostert's Mill, and talking to us about the history of this absolutely iconic Cape Town landmark and the many renovations and restorations it's undergone over the years to keep it in working order. Now, Andy, that second last restoration, the one that took 6 years and was done in waves as funds were raised privately to make it possible, a huge project. Do you want to talk to us about some of the more remarkable aspects of what it took to get it back into working order? Our listener, Don, who wrote to us, was just commenting on how fascinated he was to hear about the technical work that was involved, the kind of wood that had to be acquired. Can you paint a picture for us of some of the standout moments of that 6-year restoration?
Okay, I'd prefer to call it upgrades because it was sort of working. We worked on the millstones. They were not properly aligned with one another, and you can imagine a bedstone underneath and a runner stone on the top of it. It must be all pretty accurately matched so that they come together properly. As the Dutch say, they have to meet first before they make love. So we had to level the bedstone. We had to balance the runner stone. There was a loose bearing at the very top of the vertical shaft that had to be stabilized. What else? But the big job, the last job, was the fact that the brakes, because in a windmill you need to be able to stop the mill with a brake in order to reset the sails or reduce the amount of sailcloth that you have exposed to the wind if it's going too fast. Yeah. So you need a brake on, and the brake blocks were, we think, probably the original ones from 1796, but they were working on a brake wheel that was brought in 1994, and that had gone out of round, and it wasn't nearly as well made as the one that we did, but that comes later. But Don mentioned the lathe. I had to make a temporary lathe and make the brake wheel round again. And that meant people turning the sails on the outside so the brake wheel turned while I was able to take a grinding machine across the surface to make it round. Then we added blocks over the outside to build up the diameter, and then we had to make those blocks round again, and then we had to resize the 1796 brake blocks to match the new diameter. And that was what we finished and tested, and I've got a 1-minute video of somebody turning on the outside, somebody working on the brake mechanism, and the brake applies, and the brake is released, and the brake is applied. And I said, well, that's what they wanted us to do. And of course, the next day it was all a pile of ash.
Oh, unbelievable. I mean, Andy, I can't even begin to imagine what went through your mind when you heard that the mill was burning one day after you had successfully tested that. Take us back to that day. I mean, did you think the person was having you on when you first got the news that this was happening?
No, I was well aware because I'm involved here with the Fire Protection Association. I was well aware that there was a fire. I have a fire engine. It was giving me a bit of trouble, farm-type fire engine. I thought of going through. I thought, gee, there's a ministerial house next door. Surely they're not going to let it burn. Oh. And then the photographs started coming through our friends in the Fire Protection Association, showing worse and worse and worse news. And then, of course, it was all over.
Absolutely soul-destroying.
In a way, it's worked out better because you've heard what I said. There were shortcomings in the 1994 restoration. And we, 95, and we've now got a windmill that is better than it was after the 1995 restoration. And that all through local craftsmanship. Yeah. I was able to, we were luckily supported by we got donations from all around, but the main donor was the Rupert Historic Houses Foundation, and they, with that money behind us, it was possible to find the very, very best craftsmen in and around Cape Town, some in Cape Town, Hout Bay, here in Elgin, and we really. I was able to say to them, the best job you can possibly do, the best materials you can lay your hands on, and it wasn't necessary to ask for freebies or discounts and things like that. So these people really, and there were about 7 of us all together doing woodwork, depending on our skills and our machinery. So somebody who makes big beams, like Kimon in Hout Bay, isn't the right person to ask perhaps to do the finest cabinet making that was done here here in Gebou. So
I mean, it's a remarkable story, and several people messaging in to say how much they've enjoyed coming to have the opportunity to see the mill. I'm embarrassed to say that I've never been to visit it, Andy, after living in Cape Town since 1999 and driving past it so often and always enjoying what I see. I've never been to visit. Let's finish with information on how listeners who are fascinated by this story and want to admire the exquisite work that has been done can come and experience it for themselves. Won't you remind us of how the open days work?
The open days are every 3rd Saturday of every month, come hell or no wind. So that means this coming Saturday, and we're open from 10 until about 3 in the afternoon. And of course, if there's wind, then we mill. And we go through the whole procedure of setting it up and turning the cap to the wind and all that sort of thing, and then hope that there's enough wind to mill with. So if we're not allowed to, according to Rhodes's will, we're not allowed to charge for entry. But what we are allowed to do is we make people a member for a year, and that costs 50 rands a head or 100 rands for a family. and then they get a little ticket and they can come back as many times as they want to on every third Saturday of every month.
Okay, so this coming Saturday, I hope you'll have a horde of new Cape Talk listeners coming to take a look, Andy. We so appreciate your time this afternoon, and thank you to you and everybody else who's been involved in this painstaking work to restore it to its position. And I mean, just so wonderful to see it working again after the horror of watching it burning. What a happy ending to the story, and thank you so much for sharing it with us this afternoon.
Thanks for the exposure too. Yeah,
thank you. Andy Selfe on the line there. Appreciate your time. And by the way, the website, if you want to read up more and remind yourself of the details or join up as a member of a friend of Mostert's Mill, you want to be on mostertsmill.co.za for more information.